are you going to end the strikes in the NHS, Prime Minister?
How indeed. The headache for the Prime Minister wasn't going to ease at the New Year's first Prime Minister's questions.
Why is he choosing to prolong the misery rather than end these strikes?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we've always been clear that we want to have constructive dialogue with the unions. That is also why, when it comes to the issue of pay, we have accepted in full the independent recommendations of the pay review bodies.
His focus now on new legislation to guarantee minimum service on strike days. Labour's lack of support, he says, shows they're in hock to the unions.
Mr. Speaker, when I clap nurses, I meant it. His response to the greatest crisis in the history of the NHS is to threaten to sack our nurses.
No one denies the unions' freedom to strike, but it is also important to balance that with people's right to have access to life-saving healthcare at the same time.
Rail services are included in minimum service proposals too. Earlier, union bosses were called to give evidence to MPs, the session beginning with a bleak assessment of the prospect of resolution.
1, you remain on different planets. 10, I can go out and buy a hat for the wedding. Where are we, Mr. Whelan?
Thank you, Chair. I think you include 0 in your 1 to 10, and we're further away than when we started.
The government blamed for blocking deals.
They let the strikes go ahead over Christmas. They didn't lift a telephone or lift a finger to get them off. They brought forward stage-managed releases in the last week about minimum service levels.
The unions say transport ministers are tying the hands of employers who need their permission to make deals. For their part, the rail bosses told MPs they are feeling more hopeful.
36% of rail members of the RMT voted yes for the deal. So we only need another 2,000 people to change their views.
It sounds simple, but the last few months have shown it's anything but, and there's more disruption ahead.
Oh, let's bring in both Tess in Westminster and Catherine here in the studio with us to talk more about this. In Prime Minister's questions today, Rishi Sunak faced a lot of pressure, claims of the NHS being broken, but he also had to answer some questions about his own healthcare as well. What happened there?
Yeah, that's right, CL. This has been rumbling along for a while. When Labour's main line of attack is that the NHS is broken, you want to know, don't you, whether the Prime Minister himself is using those services, and he has refused for some time to answer whether or not he is signed up with a private GP. Today he chose PMQs to address that. He said he is registered with an NHS GP, but he did say he has in the past used what he referred to as independent healthcare. He didn't say when the last time he'd used either NHS or private healthcare was, though. Why is this important? Well, critics say that he doesn't understand the pressures that the NHS is under. Don't know whether or not this will put it to bed. There's clearly a divide between Labour and the Conservatives. Labour say that the NHS is broken because of the Conservatives, but the Conservatives are keen to point out that COVID has done a lot of damage to it. So they're not coming together there. I do have one extra bit of breaking news to bring you as well. It's going to give another headache to the government, though. We have just heard that the PCS union has announced that its workers, 100,000 civil service workers, are going to go out on strike on February the 1st, so that all adds to this pressure.
Thanks, Tessa. And we have